Hello, we are live at All Good Coffee Shop just southwest of Atlanta. I'm Q Bradley.
I am Marissa Kelly.
I'm Eli Ade.
And this is Legends Behind the Lens. We are here with one of the most seasoned stunt coordinators in the industry. He's worked on Avengers Infinity War, as well as When They See Us, and most recently, the huge blockbuster Joker. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Stephen Pope. So, Stephen, before I get started, what I want to...
Don't you ever touch a black woman's microphone.
Ta-da! What do you think?
Are you hired?
No.
I told him they shouldn't do that.
I thought it looked good.
It was good. It was appreciated, but no.
No.
He said he liked it. That's enough. That's enough for me.
I told him, I talked to him about this a number of times. I said, I have asked Steven 44 times in 3 weeks if I could be in some stunts, and he kept telling me hell no, so I don't know why y'all did it.
Well,
So,
stick
Stephen,
to our day jobs.
yeah. So we're going to get started with some superlatives for you. Okay? So Marissa has some for you, and we just want to get your honest opinions.
These are just quick fire questions just to loosen things up a bit. John Wick or Kill Bill?
Oh, jeez.
Hold on, time out. You got to be completely honest. We'll know if
Honest.
you're lying.
They're kind of the same and kind of different, right? Like they're both pulpy. I like the flow of Wick, but I like the idea of kind of like the samurai pieces in Kill Bill, right? Like it was like a nice kind of like twist to things.
Definitely.
So you have to choose one.
All right, choose one. Kill Bill.
That's good.
So Bruce Lee or Michael Jai White?
Bruce Lee, all the way.
All the way? I'd have to agree. I love me some Bruce Lee. Okay, Vin Diesel or The Rock?
Oh, Rock.
Rock, all the way? Okay. Marvel or DC?
Jeez.
Remember your job.
You know, it's like, as a body, like, Marvel's better, right? Just because I think the films themselves are better quality. And they do a lot more stuff in it, right?
Right.
Yeah, the DC just hasn't hit its stride. You
Right.
know, like it's starting. They're starting to put out some of the more recent movies. I think outside of Aquaman.
No shade.
But yeah, they just haven't hit their stride yet.
Right,
You know?
right.
So,
Understandable. So could you let us know, for all the listeners out there that might not be familiar with stunts and stunt coordination, what exactly that entails?
the easiest way to think about it is stunts incorporates anything physical on set,
Okay.
right? Like if somebody takes a pratfall and, you know, trips themselves and falls on the ground, that's a stunt. All the way up to like somebody flaming coming out of a building or like a big car crash. that would be considered a stunt.
All right. I hired
yet. No, not yet, Eli. So yeah, it could encompass anything, right? Like,
Okay.
and I always say like, you know, every film and television show like needs a stunt coordinator,
Right.
Because we're the ones that think about how to accomplish those things so that they're safe, so that they're repeatable, as opposed to like, you know, somebody just kind of taking a student film aspect. Well, it's just a slap. We'll just,
Right.
you know, have them do it, and then next thing you know, like somebody has like a red face.
Right.
So
That's another thing. Like, do you actually ever make contact in stunts, or is the idea just
I would say 98, 99% of the time you never actually make contact. Something like a slap is, you know, every once in a while you'll just be like, we've tried this, keep it safe. Are you okay getting slapped? Are you okay slapping her? Let's set like a level of like impact, and then you just do it once or twice, and then you're done with it,
Right.
right? But like everything else, yeah, you don't. I mean, you don't make contact that head hits, right?
Right.
Like if you're doing a fight, you're going to make contact with bodies because that's hard to fake, right? Like you got to make some kind of impact. You're just not full force.
have you ever had an instant where somebody might have gotten hit a little bit harder than they expect to?
Oh, absolutely.
Those are usually the takes.
I've gotten
sure
hit
you
in the
have.
face.
Tell
like,
us a story.
Plenty of times.
When's the last time you remember getting hit in the face on set? What set was it and what happened?
Last time I got hit on the face, it was years ago. Because I mean, I've been fortunate. I moved into coordinating like after doing stunts for 4 or 5 years. But like when I was still performing, I was on Homicide. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning down on the harbor. It was like end of November, so it's cold, and I'm handcuffed, and this guy's supposed to be, one of the actors is supposed to be pistol whipping me, and it's like 1, 2, 3, and I'm out, and like we've done it like 8 times already, and like it was like 1 and 2, like he makes full contact on the side of my face.
Oh, man.
And of course freaks out, right? Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, dude, if you would have just kept going, we would be done now.
Right.
But yeah, it does happen.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because you keep mentioning the fact that you're a stunt coordinator. So what's the hierarchy of stunts?
Hierarchy of stunts is, obviously like with every other department in film, right? Like you start off as a newbie. Once stunt coordinator, as a stunt person, once stunt coordinators start seeing you perform and you're a good performer, they start trusting your performance, you start trusting your safety aspect of things, and you kind of work your way into being like a full-fledged like working stunt person. And then if you show that you have the intelligence and aptitude to move into management, then you start working as a stunt coordinator.
Right.
And there's different ways to get in. There's no way really to become a stunt coordinator unless you've ingratiated yourself with another stunt coordinator that's working, and they kind of take you under their wing and start teaching you the ropes, right? Because all the politics and decision making that happens in the office is completely different than what happens on set, right? Like there's a lot of stunt people that feel like, oh, I've now been working as a stunt person for 6, 7, 8 years. I've done all the gags, or I've been around all the gags. I've covered a couple people on set, because they were on another unit or they were on another show, and so I've covered set as like a standing coordinator. I should be a stunt coordinator, but they don't understand like everything that came before that to get that plan to the point that they're executing that plan.
Right.
Is like that's the real coordinating.
Right.
So is it a lot of like financials and budgeting? And
It's a lot. It's a management job.
Yeah,
right?
that's what it sounds like.
It's I feel like being a stunt coordinator is one of the best jobs in the business, because you still get your creative side where like you're able to design stuff, but then you're also like on the management side, right, where you get to hire people, you put a crew together, you put the gags together.
Right. So
and I always say like the toughest part of being a stunt coordinator, particularly in prep, like when we're in the office designing stuff, is just try to make it through the day without saying something stupid,
Right.
Because you never know what is going to set somebody off, right? Like I've been in situations where sitting looking at, like a parkour sequence, sitting looking at like a bunch of parkour stuff, and this is like back when parkour was like the shit, and like, everybody was trying to do parkour, and the director had no concept of like the physical world, and so it's the director, 2 producers, and me sitting there looking at these tapes, and the director's like, that guy's amazing, we should get that guy. And I'm like, well, we're looking at a bunch of underground tapes on YouTube. I don't know if we could get that guy, but we'll get somebody that's just as good, right? Come the next day, the producer pulls me aside and says, I want to talk to you about what you said in that meeting. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, we are on a Disney Bruckheimer film. We could get that guy. You never tell the director you can't get somebody. And this guy's like now ready, doesn't think I know my job. And I'm like, all right, and you just got to take it, right? Like in my head, I'm going, good luck finding that guy, right? Like he's doing pirated videos in Russia.
Right.
So on that, right, with your directors,
Right.
So we have a little segment that we're gonna call, what did I say it was gonna be called? I forgot.
Scenario.
Scenario. So I'm a director, and I'm like a little overzealous.
Right.
So Steven,
Yeah.
you are not seeing my vision.
Right.
You are making me look like Patui.
Right.
Fix it.
Right.
How do you deal with? Because we've had the fortune to see you actually in action, and I know how I've seen you handle some of these directors. But like, tell us how you do, because there's a lot of politics.
What's your process?
Yes. It's
Patui, Steven.
you it's a lot of finesse, right? Like you have to just like any job, you got to understand the people that you're talking to, right?
Exactly.
So you have to understand the personalities, and if there's a way around it, I don't know. There's different ways you can handle it, right? Like a lot of times, like I'm like, all right, look, you're not getting what you want. You can't outright and say like you're not getting what you want because what you're telling people to do doesn't make sense in the physical world, right? But you say, hey, you know what? not getting what you want, just give me a sec, go talk to the guys. They know what's going on. Say, hey, we're going to do this, and then come back to the director and say, hey, just give me one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just let me, let me see if this is more what you're thinking. And then usually they go and they do their job, and it's in a way where now everybody's going, oh my gosh, that was like amazing, right? Or that's it, like let's move on, right?
Right.
Sometimes, it's tough because you butt heads with people because they really think that they know what they're talking about, but they don't, right? And I will say there are a lot of directors that really understand the physical world, right? And they understand like what it actually, if we push a person this way, then their body mechanics are going to do X, Y, and Z, right? Where other people like you push them like that, but I want them to fall this way. Well, they're not going to fall that way because you're pushing them that way, right? Like, and they don't understand the physical world.
When was the last time you worked with a director that got it? Like, who's a director that you worked with recently that just got your vision? Like, you pitched something and they were like, you know what, I'll go with it. Or is it always pushback? Is that just the relationship?
Well, no, it's not always pushback because knock on wood, I've been fortunate to have a good career. So a lot of times now, directors will just come to me and be like, all right, this is the scene. Whether you want to go by what the script says or not, like just come up with something cool. We know that this person has to take damage on the left side of their face. We know this person has to take damage on their right knee. We know this person has to take damage here, and you just figure it out. So like at the end of the scene, end of the sequence, then we could deal with that. I did NBC? No, it was Netflix. It was a Netflix show called Maniac with Cary Fukunaga, who he did the first season of True Detective, and this was like another one of those mixed genre pieces where they're different time frames, like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and Cary's a very physical guy himself, right? Like he's a guy that goes out and rides motorbikes, and he's studied martial arts, and he played tennis at a high level, and he sails yachts, and so he understands the physical world. So he was like a guy that was just like, I want this, this, and this, and I was like, all right, that makes sense. Yeah, we could do that, Or I might say, we could do that, but if we do that, we might actually break somebody's arm.
Right.
So there has to be a cut in there somewhere, or we could do, if you want it like all in one, we could do it like this way, right? But he he was easy to talk to that way.
So how do you feel about a stunt category and the Oscars?
I have mixed feelings.
Yeah.
In one sense, just because everybody else is celebrated in that way, I think it's long overdue.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, like I didn't get in stunts to be recognized, right? Like I'm a behind the scenes guy. That's why I got into stunts. But I do think that there should be a category, like whatever they want to call it, whether they want to call it stunt coordinator or action director or whatever, just because every other department is celebrated at the Oscars except for stunts, right? Like, special effects coordinators, get Academy Awards, right? And I always go back to the example of like Gladiator, right? Gladiator was nominated for everything. Best actor, best music, best set design, best movie, best supporting lead, everything. But what made that movie?
The stunts, exactly.
The guy was a gladiator, and the fact that the stunt coordinator couldn't be recognized in some way was really upsetting.
Before we go any further, can we grab you something to drink?
Yeah, I'll take a mocha, please.
Mocha?
We got the mocha.
Can we get a mocha for Mr. Pope, please? I have a question too. As we've talked a lot about, what's going on. That's our coffee delivery man. Island.
Shout out to you.
Coffee delivery man Island. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Let's take a few steps back, because part of our audience are, the people who have no clue what happens behind the camera, which is, part of why we named it, Legends Behind the Lens.
Right.
We tell people a lot of times, you should sit and you should watch the credits as they roll by, because those are all jobs, right? And although you went to Notre Dame, we won't hold that against you. And although Florida State has a longer winning streak over Notre Dame,
1993, baby. That's all.
Winning streak, but we'll ask you, where this all started. We can start, I guess, with the whole Notre Dame thing. Like, how did you stumble into stunts? Did you have a predecessor?
Because you didn't grow up wanting to be in stunts.
Nah, pardon the pun, I just kind of fell into it. Like, like literally, like I had no, I came from a small town out in Washington State, so like the idea of like working in the film industry was like completely foreign to
Where
me.
in Washington State?
Little town called Chehalis. It's like
Okay, I used to visit Anacortes a lot.
Anacortes, lovely town.
Yeah.
Where I grew up is about an hour north of Portland, like right on a 5 freeway. But yeah, they had no concept, right? Like, so just traditional upbringing, like you go off to be a doctor, lawyer, businessman, whatever. And I found myself, after I graduated, living in California, working a night shift at UPS and going, oh, there has to be a better way than this.
Did you fall in the box?
And so I was like, I'm in a movie town. I'm sure I could get a job on set, like moving stuff around, like getting coffees, whatever. So, so my film career actually started just by happenstance, and I worked as a PA for like 5-6 years, and that led me to New York because I quickly understood that like staying in Los Angeles, I was going to have to wait for about 50 people to die or retire before I was going to move up.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to meet an AP from New York, and so she brought me out to New York. And like my second job in New York, was this little movie, and I met the stunt coordinator, George Aguilar, who actually you guys met on Lovecraft. He was the second unit director. And George and I started rapping, and he played basketball in college, I played football in college, and he was like, "You're a good athlete, dude. You should be a stuntman." And I was like, "Does it pay more than being a PA?" He's like, "Yep." and so that's how I started, and then quickly, and I think because of my production background, quickly realized like, oh, okay. And also from being an athlete, like most athletes, they start tapping out like 32, 35. If you have a long career, it's like 40. So I'm like, well, what does a 50-year-old stuntman do? And I'm like, oh, you'd be a stunt coordinator. So I quickly saw that and like started paying attention and like learning, and, asking a ton of questions, which I always say to anybody that's new. If you find whatever vein of the business you want to go into, just harass that department to no end, right? Like just they always say no question's a dumb question. Don't ask the same question over and over again, right? But you gotta learn as you go, and like you can't learn if you're not asking questions.
Right.
So the stunt coordinator, and I want to understand how you all work with different parts of the production team, and like how you work with the ecosystem. So you would get the script before anyone else, pretty much.
Yeah,
And then how's the timeline of the whole on a very, very high level?
Like if if I get hired on a job, I usually get the script early on. Then I have a couple of meetings with like producers and director, figure out kind of like what their, what their vision is, like how do they want to approach stuff, because obviously you could punch somebody, but like what's the character doing, right? Like, so you just kind of get the feel of like what the movie is. And then once we get into prep, depending on the size of the job, it might be 5 weeks, it might be 2 months, right? Like,
Right.
So, but once you get into prep, then you start really breaking the script down. You're having meetings with all the different department heads, pretty much on a weekly basis. You're starting to make your plan, and so, I tend, early on, I tend to work with the production designer and the prop department.
Makes sense.
Pretty much from the beginning, because depending on, once we have locations and we know what's going to be a practical location, what's going to be a build, I start working with the production designer so I can get with art department and construction. So if they're building something specifically, I can have it built so it's stunt friendly, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and if we're out on a location, we can start talking to engineers, and like if I have to put up any attachment points for like any wire work or like or anything else that's going on, then that could be taken care of early. You start talking to props about like, all right, guy gets beat with a pipe, let's get like a couple different levels of like foam piping and see like which is the best one to use.
So that's where the coordination comes in, because you have to actually like coordinate with other
different
departments in order to make your specific scene come together.
Exactly, and it just depends what's in the script, right? If I also just because it's one of my pet peeves, I early on make friends with the costume department, right?
Yeah.
Because,
Makes sense.
Because they have their job and they have their vision,
Right.
and a lot of times they don't accommodate stunts. right? You know, like on Adjustment Bureau, you know, Matt Damon's running around the whole movie. He's like, you know, a congressman. He's wearing a $5,000 suit, right? Like,
Right.
his stunt double they put in a $4,000 suit. I'm like, why'd you do that? The guy's we need like 3
Tear
suits.
this up.
Yeah.
Right.
You know? You know, and so, you know, so you got to work with every department just to make sure that, like, once we actually get to doing the stunts, then
We're
the
prepared.
stunts could be. They could be just, they could we have full access, right? Like we could make them the best that we can, and we're not restricted because this person is wearing a specific type of dress that
Right.
you know doesn't stretch,
Right.
or whatever it is, right?
Interesting.
It is.
And
When did because I'm hearing a lot of like department cooperation, right?
oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
When did stunts become so savvy? Because you look back at like some of the stuff from like the 60s and
Yeah.
the 70s where people like jumped in the air to punch each other, and it's like
Right.
that absolutely looks ridiculous.
Right.
But I guess it worked for that time. Like, so are there like, you know, windows, or did something change with the
I think
viewer?
you know it. You know, I you know as a kid I watch movies with my folks, so you know I think about like the movies in the 60s and 70s where you would never do stunts that way now,
Yeah.
right? Like
Right.
just because almost any stunt sequence in a movie that's from the 60s or 70s looks fake to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it just doesn't look real.
Right.
You know, and part of that's the way it's shot, and part of it is just what the resources they had at the time, right?
Right.
So, you know, like they didn't have the wire work that we have now,
Mhm.
right? They didn't have the visual flexibility to erase wires. They didn't have,
Right.
you know, so things were done differently. You know, I would say like, you know, kind of once the sci-fi genre really like took off, right, and visual effects all of a sudden like really upped their game as far as like computer technology, what they could erase, what they couldn't erase, like the way that, you know, then that freed stunts up to do a lot more kind of, I would say reality based, right?
Right.
Like we could do a lot more things practically, which I find funny because I remember like guys saying, "Oh man, visual effects is going to take over. Like they're not going to need stunt people anymore." And I'm like, but they're always going to need. They're always going to
bodies,
need stunt people. They're always going to
yeah.
need bodies. They're always
Of
going to
course.
need, even if it's just bodies working as reference. They're going to need actual bodies doing what bodies do.
Right.